Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm James, and today I have a project I'd like to share with you, and it's inside this box. So let me open this up and I'll show you what I have. I got this off of eBay for I think $30. And there you have it. This is, let me get this box out of the way. This is an OS Engines OS Max 20 FP. And it came like you see here. I saw the listing on eBay. And the reason it was $30 was because the seller said that the engine was seized or frozen, and he was selling it for, or the person was selling it for parts. And I looked at it on the pictures and such, and to me the engine looked like it was actually in pretty good shape. So I thought, I bet I know what's wrong with this. So I purchased it, like I said, for 30 bucks, and I want to look at it and hopefully I can fix it. So if I turn it, well, the prop is loose, so we'll take a look at it. But yeah, it seems like it's pretty stiff. It also looks like the carburetor is a little stiff also, or not moving. So let me go ahead and get some tools out and we'll take a look at this, and I'll give you my thoughts on what I think is wrong with this engine, and we'll see if I can get it running. All right, so first thing first, let me go ahead and pull this prop off of here for right now. And then I'll pull off this little throttle cable the person had on here. Okay. All right, so there's the engine. Looks pretty decent actually. Needle valves, needle valve seems fine. So yeah, it looks like the carburetor itself, you can see that it's not rotating in there. It's stiff. And of course the engine itself will not rotate. It's stiff. And I'm going to go ahead and put the prop on here again, just so I have a little bit of leverage. See if it matters. Yeah, well, I can turn it. Actually, you can see I can turn it. So it actually is turning, but it's very, very stiff. Okay. So here's a few scenarios that I considered when I was looking at this engine, and actually engines in general. And you know, I don't know. I know that I've never had an engine that ever seized, you know, just seized because it, for whatever reason. And I've seen listings before where people say the engine is seized or it's stuck. And, you know, the way I look at it, there are probably a few different scenarios that would possibly cause that. First one would be sort of like, obviously like a crash, a mechanical break or mechanical defect in the engine. So if the engine crashed, the plane crashed, you know, if you hit the prop shaft too hard and you bend it or something like that, obviously that could damage the engine, and it would make it so that, you know, you couldn't turn it over. But I look at this engine, and yeah, it's dirty. It's got some tarnish on it and, you know, residue on it from the oils and such, but it looks like it's in really good shape. You know, if this plane, I've had a plane crash, and I've had engines like this, you know, get pretty damaged in a crash. And you know, usually what you see is maybe the glow plug breaks off, maybe some of the cooling fins break off. It's common that the needle valve will bend backwards, you know, maybe a torque, or even rip off the carburetor, things like that, damage the threads on the prop shaft here. This engine looks to me like it's never been in a crash. It looks like it's actually in really good, you know, the muffler doesn't have any major scratches on it, anything like that. So I ruled out in my mind it being in a crash. All right, so another thing that I would think about in terms of if the engine was sort of frozen or seized would be maybe it was corroded. Maybe you got some water inside of it. Maybe it was sitting someplace over the years where it got, you know, maybe it got wet and such, and it got basically rusted or corroded on the inside. And, you know, that kind of caused everything to seize up inside. Again, this engine does not look to me like it has been sitting around in any water or anything like that. It looks like it was in pretty good shape. And then, you know, another scenario is maybe the engine got overheated. Maybe they ran it too lean and it got so hot that the piston seized, it froze up in there, and you damaged the engine that way. I guess that can happen. You know, I have had engines overheat. I've run my engines by accident, a little bit too lean, and they're flying around and they stall out. That's not good for the engine. You know, you don't want that to happen. But, you know, and it may cause some damage to it. And if you do that over and over again, obviously that could really damage the engine, I guess, over time. But I've never heard or seen something happen to where an engine runs so lean, so hot, so fast that it actually just freezes the engine, you know, and I just don't think I've ever heard of that. You know, maybe you have. If you've had some experiences with things like that, let me know, put them in the comments. But I've never seen that. So it leads me to this leads me to what I think is wrong with this engine, and pretty much what I'm going to say right now what I know is wrong with this engine. Okay, so this engine's pretty old. This is an OS Max FP engine. This is an FP series engine. It's a 0.2 cubic inch, and these engines came out in the 1980s, like the mid 1980s. They came out with a series of these engines, and these engines were, back then, they were considered sort of economy. I don't know if economy is the right word, but they were just a series of engines that OS produced that were supposed to be a little bit more affordable, a little bit easier to use, and they were pretty popular. This is the type of engine that I used to fly back when I was in high school. I had an OS 2025 FP. So this engine is pretty old. So this is going on 40 plus years, right? So I imagine that the person that had this, and this may or obviously I don't know exactly, but this engine probably has been sitting around somewhere. Someone flew it and used it, and like, again, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. And they probably didn't, you know, clean the engine when they finished using it for the last time. That happens, right? And things happen in life. You move on, this and that. You put something in storage and you don't look at it again for 10 years. So what I think happened is that the engine was put into storage and it had leftover oils and fuel inside the engine. And over time, those oils and fuel degrade. And the way I kind of look at it, and I don't know this for sure, I can't say that I'm an expert and know exactly what happens, but I think what would happen, or I think what does happen, is of course the volatiles are going to evaporate out of the engine. The leftover fuel, if you will, is going to just evaporate away, and it's going to leave just the oil. Now, a lot of times the oils, and even today, a lot of times the oils that were used were castor oils, and a castor oil, from my understanding, can leave both the residue when it's running. It leaves a residue, and also when it's sitting there it can leave a residue. So I think basically what happened is over the years this thing just basically got gummed up. It basically has been sort of glued together, and I imagine if we could take this thing apart, and I could, you would see a residue inside the engine. All right, and here's some common fuel. This is Morgan's Cool Power. This is a synthetic blend. But it has the oils, and it has the synthetic oils in it, but also has the combustible components, and that's the methanol and the nitromethane. Those two items are, like I mentioned, are volatile, and they're going to evaporate out, and they're going to leave this oil behind. I had a fuel tank that was sitting, actually I had a plane that was sitting on a shelf in my garage for many, many years, and I took it down, and the engine was stuck, it wouldn't turn over, and I looked at the fuel tank, and I must have been using like a castor blend because it was pinkish, and it was just pure oil. It looked like syrup inside there. So basically what happened was, over the years, all of those volatiles, all those combustibles evaporated out of the fuel mixture, leaving behind that oil just leaving the oil behind. And I imagine the same thing sort of happens inside the engine. It just basically gets gummed up. So the way I'm going to try to fix this is actually pretty simple. I don't know if fix is even the right word. I'm just going to sort of refurbish it. Now, I did this before on a similar engine I got in a similar way off of eBay, and it was this thing. It was this is a 60. This is an FP 60, and this person was selling it cheap because they said that the carburetor was stuck. You know, looks like I got some junk in there, but they said the carburetor was stuck. And all I did was heat the carburetor up, and it loosened it up. I put some oil in there. Thing runs great. It's an awesome running engine. In fact, I'm hoping to use this one day on a build. So I'm going to try to do the same thing for this. Okay, as I mentioned, I'm going to heat this up, try heating it up and get it moving. The way I'm going to do that, I'm going to try just using a heat gun. This is a heat gun used for shrinking electric tubing, heat shrink tubing for electrical purposes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull the, I'm going to start by pulling off the glow plug, and I'll take a look at the glow plug itself later. But I'm going to pull this off so that I don't have compression in there. That'll make it easier to get things going. Yeah, so definitely this engine definitely was run, no issues there. And looking down inside, I can't see much in there. So I'm going to pull that off. And that, honestly, like I said, it actually does turn over. It's very, very stiff. But yeah, it definitely needs to get loosened up. And then this carburetor here, again, this is stiff also, so I want to heat that up and loosen that up also. So let me go ahead, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull this arm off the carburetor here because it's plastic. I'm going to pull that off because I don't want to melt it. So let me go grab a screwdriver, and we'll just pull this off of here. Hopefully. Here it goes. Set this aside. Going to leave that on there. What I want to do is I actually want to get it turning over, get it nice, and hopefully get it smooth. And I'm going to put everything back, and I'm just going to try to run it as it came to me. You know, I don't want to replace the glow plug just yet. I may have to do that, probably will. But I just want to get it running with how it was sent to me. And then to make it a little bit easier just to handle, I'm just going to go ahead and mount it on my test stand. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to pull that carburetor barrel out of there. Put the screw back in it. My finger's going to be in the way, but get down in there. Okay, so I'm just going to screw this in just so I can grab it. I'm going to try to pull it out with a pair of pliers. So if you get an engine and someone tells you, hey, this engine doesn't work because the carburetor's stuck and it's broken, say, I'll take it. I'll take a look at it. You can try doing this. Just put the screw back in like that. And now we're going to heat it up, and we'll see if we can get it to loosen up, and I can pull this out, hopefully. Actually, what I forgot to do is I have to actually pull the needle valve assembly off because it's also screwed into that carburetor barrel. So let me see if I can carefully do that. I don't have a wrench that small. I'm going to start by just trying to loosen up the housing, if you will. I'm going to pull the valve needle, the needle out. Just going to carefully. Oh, there it goes. That was easy. So we'll pull this out of here. Just got to be careful. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of oil. I am just going to be using some Marvel mystery oil for pneumatic tools. This stuff here. I'll put some of this in. So once I do get it moving, hopefully it'll kind of help lubricate it. I'm going to throw some in the cylinder here also. So as I heat this thing up, maybe some of that oil will work its way in to places. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that little O-ring off of there, and we'll see if we can get this loosened up. Then also I'm also going to pull my air bleed screw out, just so it's easier to work with this thing. Oops. There. And then the throttle stop screw. Now I don't want to damage the carburetor. I don't want to scratch it. So I'm going to go ahead and try to hold it with these pliers and this piece of cardboard to help protect it. Still kind of hot. Let's see if I can pull this out of here. Ooh, there it goes. But there we go. Okay, so this is still kind of hot, so let me grab it with this. So you can kind of see, hopefully, maybe you can see in here. Maybe hard to see in there, but it's just, there's just some residue, that brownish residue. It's probably related to castor oil. And again, this one's the same way. Oops. Sorry about that, but there it is. Okay, so since I have that residue all over this stuff, I'm going to put it in a jar. I'm going to put all this stuff in a jar. Now I'm just going to try to clean it with a little bit of acetone. Let it soak for a little bit of time. And then I'll work on the engine. And I might as well throw the little glow plug in there, let this get cleaned off. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing I did on the carburetor. I'm just going to put some more oil in here. And you know, the thing about this is, I know a lot of you are looking at it going, you know, I want you to take the whole thing apart. I can do that. I will take it all apart if I need to. I just want to try to see if I can get it turning and get it smooth enough to where I can try to get it running, just to see how it runs straight from the person who sold it to me. I just want to see how that goes. If I have to take it all apart, I will. But I'm hoping that it's just kind of a simple thing, just getting it loosened up. And you know, if the engine starts running and it starts to burn and get hot, it will hopefully kind of burn some of that crap away inside of there. And maybe I don't have to take it all apart. I'm going to take sort of a lazy approach, but I think this is going to work. Okay, so there you have it. So, you know, obviously, as I mentioned when I first started this, the engine guy said it was seized. I was able to move this a little bit when I got it out of the box, so it wasn't completely seized. But now it's really nice, and now it's very, very good. I got that oil in there, I heated it up, and I think this thing's going to run just fine. So I'm going to take a little bit of finer steel wool. I'm just going to gently try to see if I can just wipe it off. This little slot in here, this little slot is really not that important because that's just where the set screw goes. That's just, the screw just sits in and holds the carburetor barrel open at a certain angle, or I mean a certain setting. So it doesn't really matter. I just want to make sure that this surface is clean and smooth so that it rotates nicely. And it'd be nice to get inside of the throat here with some steel wool also. Clean it up a little bit in there. Okay. So I think that's looking pretty good. I think that was going to rotate nicely in there. And let me see what I can do to the body itself. And you can see in there that tarnish in there, that residue. I'm going to be careful. I don't want to damage it, scratch it. I'm going to be very careful, just kind of lightly get in there. Honestly, if you can get it turning smoothly and operating nicely, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean. Then what I'll do, I'll have to make sure I don't get any of these little bits of steel wool in the engine itself. So I'll make sure this is very clean before I try to start the engine or assemble it again. I think that looks really good now. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and just put it all back together. Just put my O-ring back on. Again, this is a bleed type carburetor. It doesn't have a fine or a low idle adjustment screw. And when we adjust the air bleed, the initial setting is, if you look in that hole, it's hard to tell, you can't see it here, but when you look in that hole, what you want is it to be halfway open, so the screw will go all the way in, and you'll look in there, and you have to look really close, and when the screw is like halfway in, protruding into the hole, that's sort of the factory setting. And we'll put our needle valve assembly back on. That's kind of nice and tight like that. That's good. The needle itself looks very clean and undamaged or anything. Looks very good. And it actually goes on there very nice and stiff. Sometimes they can get loose. I'm gonna go ahead and push it all the way down and open it up about 2 turns. Start it about there. And there we go. The carburetor is nice and smooth. It's adjusted. I had to switch my screws around. I had the screws in the wrong location, but I switched them over. But I got it closed in about right there. And maybe you have to close just a little more. And I also have my air bleed right in the middle of that hole there. So carburetor is good to go. Let's get it all hooked up here. Oh, I got to put my glow plug in. Hold on. Okay, well, I think the smart thing to do is just go ahead and check the glow plug real quick since I have it out. I am going to just hook it up here real quick. You'll see how bright it is. You can't always tell by that, but if it looks like it's going to be bright enough, I'll try it. If it looks like it's hot enough, I'll try it. If not, I'll just replace it. Let's go ahead and set it up here. Looks pretty good. We'll try it out. All right. Thing's got really good compression. Okay, so I'm gonna open this up about 2 turns. That's not a good sign. That could be a bad. Made it a little bit too lean, but it's running pretty good and a little rough, but I think it's running great. Let me try it again here. Okay, well, there you have it. This thing runs really, really nice. And I had a little bit of trouble with it at the idle, going from idle to full throttle. It cut out on me, as you saw in the video. And what was happening, it was a little bit too rich. I leaned it up a little bit here, and it runs really great now. Now it picks up really, really fast right off the idle, as you saw. And the thing is running really, really good. Okay, so that's going to be about it for this video, and just a little note that if you do see some of these old engines for sale on places like eBay that look like they're probably okay and they're cheap enough, you know, maybe interesting, maybe kind of fun to purchase one of them and tinker around with it and see if you can get it running. Again, I wouldn't, you know, just got to be careful when you're buying stuff off a place like eBay. But if you see something and it looks relatively inexpensive or cheap and looks like something you can play with or work with, by all means, try it out. It's really fun. Okay, so I got this OS 20 FP working pretty good. Now I just need to find a plane to put it on. Okay, so thanks for watching my channel. I always appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.